This is Musical Talk.
Musical Talk.
The UK's independent musical theatre podcast.
Musical Talk. The UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Musical Talk. My name is Nick Hutson. As you can probably tell, I have a slight cold, so do please stand back from your iPod. We're going to have a lovely interview with Mr. Alan Menken in a bit, but first I want to talk about the Olivier Award nominations that were just announced at the time of recording this episode. There's probably no surprises that Matilda is the big show, being nominated for no less than 10 Olivier Awards. That's one for every single category in the musical theatre list that they have. Also, very strong nominations are Ghost, with, I think, 5 nominations in total. A good event for Matthew Warchus, again, and his wonderful creative team, of which we had some members on this very podcast. But the exciting thing is that hopefully Musical Talk will be at the Olivier Awards. We won't be watching the awards themselves, but we will be on the red carpet and possibly in the press room itself. So do stay tuned to Musical Talk around April the 15th or whatever it is, and we'll be sure to provide you with a very, very special episode. But this is also a very special episode because I am being joined by Alan Menken. Hi, Alan, how are you?
Hi, good, Nick. How are you?
Very well, thank you. We're going to talk about Leap of Faith and Newsies, but first I want to talk to you briefly about Robert Sherman, whose sad passing happened quite recently. Do you have any stories to share about Mr. Sherman?
You know, he and I only met a couple of times. I think I met him at Mary Poppins. I don't think I met him at Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I knew Richard much better, and Richard has been such a wonderful friend in extraordinary ways. And both of them together were just an inspiration to all of us, especially any of us who found ourselves fortunate enough to work at Disney. We were around their songs all the time. And there was really a special quality to what they did. Of course, we all know now the little bit of the story, the backstory of the Sherman brothers and some of the tensions that existed between Robert and Richard, which I guess were natural in any family. And the work is something that will supersede any of that. I just send my best wishes to Robert's family and to Richard's family and all the Shermans.
I mean, they are, in a way, they're the pre-Ashman and Menken, if you would agree with that.
Well, they're more than that, but they had a career, their career at Disney and also their career independent from Disney. They were a very good writing team, both, pop music, theater music, and film music.
We even forgive them writing It's a Small World.
Oh, we always will love It's a Small World. I would be very proud if I had written that song.
We're very lucky to have you on Musical Talk, Alan, because it's an extremely busy time for you. I don't know how you do it, really, to have 2 shows opening almost at the same time. I mean, you went into rehearsals for Leap of Faith and Newsies on the same day.
It wasn't what I would have chosen as my schedule, and it is what it is. So we make the best of it. One of my big concerns when both shows were going into rehearsal at the same time was the impact on my music team, especially my longtime musical director, Michael Katherine, who supervises so much of the work that I do. And ironically, just, last week he was rushed in for a little bit of emergency surgery. He's fine now. But, it's a very tenuous thread that keeps us all, functioning the way we need to be functioning to make sure these shows turn out as well as we need them to turn out.
This is a hard interview for me to do because to be honest, I know very little about Newsies. I know even less, obviously, about Leap of Faith. I know the score of Newsies because, let's face it, the film wasn't well received, was it?
The reviews were mixed, I'd say, deservedly so. But there were some nice things about it. People really enjoyed that it was a break into song original film musical with a very energetic score and a tuneful score, and people really liked that. I think rightfully so. There were elements of the film that didn't resonate that well with critics. But it wasn't that reaction that was memorable. What was memorable was the fact that nobody went to see it. It was just extraordinary that it did like nothing at the box office. I felt it was relegated to being one of those projects, that you just will always remember fondly and maybe play songs from. But it's, sort of lives in your trunk. So for those of you who don't know, Newsies was the story of a group of newsboys. It's actually a true story in terms of the strike. Group of newsboys in turn-of-the-century New York who struck against the world, and the world being the newspaper. So basically it was a spontaneous labor movement. The musical itself is about a particular character named Jack Kelly and this group of newsies and their struggle. And over the years, it was, went to VHS tapes and then DVD, and it was on cable. And sort of under the radar, it became a real cult favorite among your generation here in the States. It was never really known overseas very much, but it became a real cult thing here in the States. And sort of unnoticed by most of us. Where we did notice it was there was a lot of pirated productions of Newsies, either at schools or at camps or, I would find myself, I'd go into like a shopping mall and I'd hear one of the songs from Newsies being performed by a group of kids, in some sort of a public setting. And I go, what's going on here? And
you were straight on the phone to your lawyer?
Not at all. I was thrilled. I hardly going to my lawyer because there wasn't money to be made from a live performance. But it was very striking to me that people loved it, and yet there was no licensed version for people to perform. So the next thing that happened, once Disney, finally sort of took notice of that, they said, how about we put out a stock and amateur version of Newsies, and it'll just go, be there for schools and for camps and for community theaters. And you don't really need to worry yourself about it. You're busy with other things. We'll hire some other writers to come in and maybe add a few more songs and just fill it out. And there'll be some money to be made by everyone rather than there just being these pirated productions. And I said, no. I'm not going to allow anyone else to work on this. Other than me as a composer, this is my musical. And I think, they were a little taken aback by that because, it just was something that nobody ever really felt much about, but I did, and Jack Feldman did. And so that kind of changed the Disney calculation, and we worked then towards just a little production that would help publicize what was going to be the stock and amateur version that would then be released. And that little production at Paper Mill Playhouse became much more than that. It grew, first of all, simply because of public attention. It grew because young actors, all the young actors of a certain age, when they heard about it, said, I want to play those roles. It began to just gather its own momentum, and a lot of very, very talented people, including Harvey Fierstein as a book writer and Jeff Calhoun as director, came aboard, and this became a major musical production, and it seems to be becoming the one of the hits of this season. And it's a bit of a surprise to all of us, very pleasant one.
I do, however, have a friend from the States who's a big fan of Newsies. She introduced me to it years and years ago. Her name is Beth. So she has, in a way, written some questions for you, and I want to put some on to you. The first one is, given the cult following surrounding the movie, have the changes for the stage show met with any resistance from fans? Did you run into any difficulties revising material that has such a die-hard fan base?
A little bit. And it was definitely, some of it was homegrown. My own daughters said, oh, no, you can't do this, or don't do that, or don't blow at that. Little tiny things that fans hang on to that we've changed. Nothing major at all, but just there are little changes. I would say for the most part, the production is very, very much in keeping with the movie and takes the best of the movie and improves upon it. And I think most fans agree. We've
had Christopher Gattelli on the podcast quite early on in his career. Tell us about what you think of him as a choreographer.
Oh, Chris is great. The choreography to Newsies is so dynamic and acrobatic and exuberant. It's really it's a tremendous choreographic show.
Because you watch, for example, Carrying the Banner, and it's such a brilliant opening number. I think we talked about it in our first ever interview, Alan, and it always makes sense for it to be on the stage, like a lot of your projects, but because that's how you approach everything you do, isn't it?
You mean I think of it for stage? I would say I think of, when I write a musical, I certainly think of it in terms of the construction of a story to be told through song. But for me, a musical is either on stage or on film or on record or on television. So it's a little bit of a misnomer to say that exclusively for stage. Newsies was written very much as a film musical, but a lot of the same rules apply.
There's a new female character in the musical adaptation on the stage show, isn't there?
Yeah, there was always a little bit of an implied romance between Jack Kelly and the sister of David and Les in the movie, and it was never fully realized. Harvey Fierstein had the wonderful idea of having this young reporter be sort of combining the characters of Denton, who was a reporter who reported on the Newsies, and a young love interest into one character, and her name is Katherine. And I won't tell you, who in the story she ends up to be. I'd rather it be a surprise to people when they see the show. But it's a very interesting plot twist, and it really seems to work well.
But this is a limited engagement, isn't it? Which I think is, I don't see that lasting. I think the show will grow to be even bigger.
We'll see. I mean, I think Disney, honestly, sincerely, always were looking towards this being released for stock and amateur as something they wanted to move to as quickly as possible, because, Disney is a company that likes to make money. And there's money to be made in that. I would say at this point, it's a limited run that could extend and then could extend further. Honestly, I'm not being disingenuous when I tell you I don't really know what the long-term plan would be if it does really, really well. I mean, I presume it would keep running, but it's not my decision, and it's not something anyone has really definitively told me, what the plan is.
I presume you've written new songs and cut songs?
Yes, we've cut, for those who know the movie, we cut High Times, Hard Times, and we cut Lovey Dovey Baby. We have a new song for Pulitzer, a new song for Meta, a few new songs for the new love interest duets between Jack and Katherine. We have a new song for Katherine. We have a new song for the Brooklyn Newsies. And there's been a lot of rewrites and updating in songs that had existed in the score before. And
very much in the tradition of Oklahoma, you start with a kind of a solo ballad, don't you? You've moved Santa Fe. Yes.
Well, Santa Fe now exists in two pieces. It's at the top of Act 1 and at the end of Act 1, and it's also a little piece of it at the end of Act 2. And where it was sung in the original movie, that moment no longer exists. But Santa Fe still very much fills the function that was implied in the movie. It's just much more successfully does that. And one of the wonderful ideas that Harvey Fierstein had when he came aboard, besides the idea of Katherine, was to open with Santa Fe in a moment that's almost reminiscent of the top of Peter Pan, Never Neverland, in that way that sort of sets the story in motion.
Will we have a cast recording? I think that would be the good way to preserve this forever as regards.
Oh, yeah. This is one of those circumstances where we've actually already done the cast recording. It's being mixed as we speak. It will be out simultaneously with the show.
Now, the show I know absolutely naff all about is Leap of Faith, so I'm just going to take a leap of faith now, Alan, and just let you talk about it. Go.
Go. Okay. The original writer of Leap of Faith, Janice Zircone, is somebody I had been friends with going way back in my early days in New York when she was living there. And in 92, when the movie came out, I honestly didn't even know that Janice had been writing. At the time when I knew her, she was somebody who was involved with, I believe, tour promotion and other things. And I think management as well. But so I was really amazed, and I went to see the movie, Leap of Faith, and I was very, very impressed with the story and the way it was written and performed. And I loved the fact that it was a story that was basically told through these gospel revivals, and through the spirituality of the revival and also the backstage story that's told through these revivals. and of course the exuberance of gospel music. And I said, this is great. Might even make a good stage musical. And I just kind of stored that information away. And a few years later, Janice and Michael and Frankel Group here in New York asked if I would come aboard to write a stage version of Leap of Faith. And that was about 10 years ago. So it's been a long journey. In a nutshell, Leap of Faith is the story of a con man, a charlatan evangelist who goes into this town and in an attempt to completely rip off the town, actually makes a miracle happen. And this disabled boy who believes in him and how that affects him. And, it's a good story, but it's a story, of course, that is reminiscent of other stories like Music Man or
110 in the Shade comes to mind.
Exactly. So much of the appeal of Leap of Faith is not simply the story, but the way it's told, where it's really come together. We had a production in Los Angeles that did, I'd say, mixed at best. And I think the problem was it was very weighted down by the book's its structure as a book musical. We really needed to shake up the way the story was being told, which is exactly what we did in the changes that we made subsequent to Los Angeles. And a new book writer, Warren Light, came in to co-write with Janny. Chris Ashley came on board as director, and Sergio Trujillo came on board as choreographer. It was still Glenn Slater and me who wrote the songs. Glenn, as you know, of course, was also my collaborator on Sister Act and on Tangled and many other projects, on the new songs for Little Mermaid. And it really is a revival within a revival. The Jonas Nightingale revival has come to the St. James Theater basically to save souls. And in order to save souls, they are going to tell the story of what happened in Sweetwater, Kansas. This con man came into town and God came through him. So one of the really neat things about Leap of Faith is you're always going between the sincerity of the miracle and the con. And, sort of, which is the reality, the con or the miracle? Or are they both reality? It's so dynamic and so physical and so exciting, and it's a real thinking person's musical. It's really got a lot to say. Raul Esparza plays our lead, and he's, as you probably know, is a fantastic performer. And yes, he's beyond a triple threat. He's just embodies this character of Jonas. We have a wonderful gospel choir in the show, and as we speak, we are getting the show ready to go into tech at the St. James Theater. It's going to be very, very exciting. We're going to go right to the wire because we're making changes right and left, but you can just feel the energy in the room. There's really a tremendous amount of creativity and talent going into this show, and it's going to be amazing and exciting.
When you're writing for a gospel choir, how do you, like with Hercules, for example, was a lot of that improvised by the choir or the riffs and things, or did you and the vocal arranger or whomever you work with, did they write that all down?
Well, yes, of course. Everything is written down. I mean, now where there are people riffing and doing the natural things you do in a gospel choir, it's sort of like a controlled fire. You give a structure, and you allow people, the singers to live within it. So it's always a combination of there's absolute arrangements, vocal arrangements, orchestrations, every bit of professionalism that's in a Broadway musical to the nth degree, and over and above that is the improvisation that you want from a gospel choir. And, that's something you always balance and carefully work.
It's just such an infectious, brilliant sound that is inherently so theatrical, isn't it?
Oh yeah, well it's theatrical and celebratory in the most wonderful way, and gospel really runs through all the pop music of our time now. It's the Rolling Stones have a lot of gospel too, and the Beatles did, and gospel is one of the dominant languages affecting our music right now. I love going back to the pure source of it, and it's a lot of fun.
Bridge Over Troubled Water is a great gospel song, for example, that people don't seem to...
Oh, absolutely. You know, you can gospelize just about anything. You know, gospel is not just a color and a musical style. Gospel is a attitude and a certain kind of freedom. It's not just in the chords and in the notes. Gospel is very much in so many elements, but certainly in Leap of Faith, we're going back to the source, where gospel is part of the religious service, the repetitive nature of exhorting to God, and in the hand clapping, and in the rhythm, and in the way you're able to sort of make sudden changes that are so exciting, and just that sound of the choir. There's something about it that's irresistible.
Again, I can't wait for a cast recording. I hope one emerges.
Me too. Well, you know, the story of Leap of Faith is being told right now. It's all very, very, everything is formative at the moment. And, when I finish this conversation, I go back into the rehearsal room for Leap, and we'll see what happens today.
And you're on Twitter, which is a newish development for you. So where can people find you on Twitter, Alan?
Oh, AI Menken. I don't do it that often. I get myself in a lot of trouble when I do too much tweeting, because often when I tweet, it will be something that's bothering me, or when I'm happy about something that maybe the world shouldn't know about yet. I have a little bit of a strange relationship with Twitter, but I will try to tweet more. I haven't quite gotten the hang of just, what I'm thinking at the moment and saying it. I have to really be careful that what I say is not going to be hurtful or destructive or preempt someone else's announcements.
It's a very interesting revolution, isn't it?
Oh, yes, it's very interesting. It is one of those things that does separate generations to a degree. Younger people who have grown up with the technology are a little more attuned to just sort of spitting out what's going on at the moment for them. Those of us who grew up earlier are still used to more dated mediums like the ads in the paper or interviews.
Or just paper in general.
Oh, paper. Yes, paper. Imagine that.
I saw a fascinating video of you recently, Alan, and you might be able to guess where I'm going here. You have some special pets at home, don't you?
Oh, God. Yes. Well, those are more my wife's passion than mine, I suppose. We have the normal dogs and cats, and we have tortoises. And the tortoises basically came about because, oh, God, I want to say maybe 15 years ago, Janice requested a box turtle for her birthday.
Your wife, Janice?
My wife, Janice. Our friends, one is a veterinarian, the other runs the animal hospital, suggested we get these African leopard tortoises, who are wonderful animals, beautiful. And we got them. They were about the size of a quarter or maybe a silver dollar at most. And, of course, they grew quite dramatically. The care for these tortoises is very specific. They need a certain temperature. They need certain they need a little pond of water. They need certain kinds of greens. They need a certain kind of exercise. Once we set up the environment for them, one thing led to another, and we got more tortoises. And then once we had more tortoises, we increased the environment, and just one thing led to another, and now we have an addition onto our house that houses tortoises. And it's unique, and it's I scratch my head about it sometimes, but I love my life, and it's what it is.
Sounds a bit like Little Shop of Horrors to me.
A little, maybe a little bit.
Hopefully they don't feed on human blood, though.
They more feed on strawberries and dark greens, and they're wonderful, wonderful animals.
You have a film coming out which is nothing to do with musical theatre, but looks quite interesting. It's another modern twist on a fairy tale, isn't it?
Yes, it's Mirror Mirror, and I just was hired to write the film score for Mirror Mirror. I didn't write any songs, and that came about kind of last minute for me. It was in the fall. My representative said, wouldn't it be good for you to do a movie that's A, not a musical, and B, not Disney. Just because, first of all, let people see your film scoring just as film scoring, because I do love doing that, and it's something I don't get enough opportunities to do. So I threw my hat in the ring for Mirror Mirror, and they said, "Great, we'd love you to do it." And I had a blast scoring this movie. And it's coming out end of this month on March 30th here at the States. I don't know when it opens over your way, but pretty soon after, I'm sure. And it's a retelling of the Snow White story from the point of view of the Queen, played by Julia Roberts. Snow White is played by Lily Collins, who's actually Phil Collins' daughter. Armie Hammer, who was in Social Network, plays the prince, and he's fantastic. It's a lot of fun. It's a I hope it does well. I don't know if I've actually seen the finished print. I don't think I have. I've seen previews of the movie, so I'll be as interested to see the finished product as everybody else is.
Are you happier in a film scoring soundstage or a rehearsal room for a theatre?
Well, they're very different environments. In a rehearsal room, it really is about the director and the actors, and I'm standing back and just kind of watching as they rehearse and giving my input as is needed. And sometimes it's very, very intense because you have to rewrite a song or go and pinpoint a problem that really needs to be fixed very quickly and brainstorm with everybody about how you could do that. A film scoring session, however, you go in and in a very fixed amount of time, you're recording the music that you've written over the course of months with a large orchestra. And it's such a thrill to be in front of that large orchestra. You never get an orchestra that size with any theater project. And it's, of course, divided into each of these little cues. A lot of prep has gone into the film scoring. So, I mean, the short answer is I love both of them. Truly, I do. Both cases, I suppose, the most exciting thing for me is the moment when I'm in my own space writing the material. And they both are very joyful experiences. I'd say a film soundstage is probably a more intensely enjoyable experience than a rehearsal room for a musical, simply because it's more going on in a very concentrated period of time. I would say probably a preview of a show, actually on stage, is more analogous to a film scoring stage when you have the full orchestra and you have the sets and the costumes and the lights
and the audience.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much again for coming on Musical Talk today.
Thank you, Nick. It's great talking to you.
Thank you.
This is Alan Menken, and you are listening to Musical Talk.
Alan Menken there. Thank you very much for listening to this week's episode of Musical Talk. Be sure to join us next week, where I'm sure we'll have an equally fabulous episode for you. Please do keep in mind that this episode is copyright Musical Talk 2012.